Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we warmly welcome you today to the side event on the UPR protest in Azerbaijan. And today, among my colleagues are representatives of IRFS, Institute for Reporters Freedom and Safety, who are the host of the event. I'm representing the Institute for Human Rights, and I will be moderating the event. And today, among our speakers is the CEO of IRFS, Emin Husseinov, my colleague on the left, Karina Pavlova, the member of IRFS, Jala Bayramova, the daughter of imprisoned Gubari Bodogly and human rights activist, and Abid Gafarov, a former prisoner of conscience and human rights defender. With no further ado, I will pass the floor to my colleague Karina. She will present briefly the situation with restrictions imposed on NGOs and civil society in Azerbaijan. Karina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Diana, for the introduction. We're very grateful to have the opportunity also to conduct a side event dedicated to the UPR process in Azerbaijan. For us, as for representatives of the civil society, working on this topic is extremely important, but also extremely difficult, as many restrictions on the NGO work exist in Azerbaijan. During the previous review of Azerbaijan, the country received numerous recommendations to ensure safe environment for the work of NGOs. Namely, Netherlands recommended Azerbaijan to enhance the protection of journalists, human rights defenders, and NGOs by removing undue restrictions to access foreign grants and amending NGO legislation, particularly regarding the restriction, operation, and funding of NGOs. While Belgium insisted on taking all necessary measures to support the development of a vibrant civil society, in particular by simplifying the rules on the financing of NGOs. Overall, 10 member states advised the Republic of Azerbaijan to review its legislation regarding NGOs in order to ensure a safe and enabling environment for them to operate and have free access to funding. The government failed to comply with the international standards. The law on NGOs has existed since the end of 2013. This law was used to limit the activities of many NGOs and even to arrest some civil society activists, including those particularly participating in programs legally financed by international organizations. Moreover, the European Court of Human Rights recently found the freezing of the accounts of more than 10 NGOs and their members unlawful, ordering the Azerbaijani government to unfreeze the banking accounts and pay compensation. But Azerbaijani government seem to ignore these judgments and doesn't fulfill the judgment requirements. IRFS has also been inflicted with Azerbaijani illegal intervention into the independent functioning of civil society. In 2014, the Sabail District Court authorized the investigating authorities to search the organization's office and other places of storage, and to seize legal, financial, accounting, and banking documents related to the organization's activities, and its receipt of grants and other financial aid, as well as electronic devices containing such information and documents. On 8th of August 2014, the search was carried out in 2 offices of IRFS situated in the same building, in the presence of its deputy chairman and its lawyer. The investigating authorities seized laptops, computer system units, video cameras, photo cameras, voice recorders, mobile phones, CDs and DVDs, video cassettes, hard drivers, flash drivers, mobile phone SIM cards, a seal, stamps, and all the documents. The criminal proceeding was opened against the organization and the bank account was frozen, leaving IRFS with no possibility to further maintain its activities on the territory of Azerbaijan. The European Court of Human Rights issued at least 2 decisions in regards to the government's arbitrariness, ruling it to restore an access to the bank account and seize property, but Azerbaijani government neglectfully disobeyed the court's decision. Overall, the current regime eroded any space for civil society, as the legal framework imposes significant constraints on the freedom of NGOs to operate independently, particularly in activities deemed political interests of the ruling regime. The legislation allows for existing government oversight, enabling authorities to interfere with the internal affairs of NGOs, including their funding sources and operational decisions. Certain activities, especially those related to human rights advocacy or political matters, are often restricted, requiring additional permission or facing outright prohibition. The constitution in Azerbaijan guarantees freedom of association, but in practice, laws impose significant limitations on this right and severely restricts the activities of NGOs. Authorities have conducted criminal investigation and harassment against certain independent organizations, resulting in very few being able to freely operate. Various legal provisions allow the government to regulate the activities of political parties, religious groups, businesses, and NGOs. NGOs seeking legal personality status are required to register with the Ministry of Justice, yet the registration process remains vague, burdensome, and non-transparent. Delays in this process restrict citizens' right to associate, with additional laws mandate specific citizenship requirements, such as demanding that deputy heads of NGO branches must be citizens if the branch head is a foreigner. Moreover, administrative codes and laws governing NGOs, grants, and legal entity registration impose further restrictions on the operation of unregistered, independent, and foreign organizations. Foreign donors, for instance, must obtain pre-approval before signing grant agreements. The legislation makes unregistered and foreign NGOs susceptible to dissolution, which discourages potential activists and donors from supporting civil society organizations. Foreign NGOs desiring to operate in the country must sign an agreement and register with the Ministry of Justice. They are obliged to show support for Azerbaijani people's national and cultural values and refrain from religious and political propaganda. The registration process lacks a specified time limit, granting the government wide discretion in declining whether to register a foreign NGO or not. As of the end of this year, only one foreign NGO had managed to renew its registration under these rules. Political environment in Azerbaijan is marked by a lack of pluralism and competition. The ruling New Azerbaijani Party dominates the scene, while opposition parties face significant limitations in their ability to operate and engage with the public. Laws restricting the organization of rallies and limited access to television coverage further hamper opposition activists. Moreover, violent crackdowns on Islamic political movements that gain national prominence have become a recurring pattern. In a recent development, Azerbaijan passed a new law on political parties, which introduced numerous restrictions on their activities. One of the most criticized provisions is the requirement for parties to have a minimum of 5,000 active members in order to register. Critics argue that this law is designed to suppress dissent and hinder the functioning of existing opposition parties while preventing the formation of new ones. As a result, nearly 30 political parties have already been disbanded in the country. Venice Commission and ODIHR have already expressed their concern regarding this new law on political parties. According to them, several provisions of the law have the potential to undermine pluralism in the country. These provisions include increasing the minimum number of party members required, imposing re-registration for already registered parties, and introducing lengthy procedures for party establishment and registration. Furthermore, the law grants excessive control to the Ministry of Justice over party activities and membership registered, overregulates internal party structures, and allows for the suppression or dissolution of a party for reasons not involving serious violations of the law. These regulations raise significant concerns about the right to freedom of association, a right guaranteed by international human rights instruments and the national constitution. The Venice Commission and ODIHR stressed that the rights to free association and expressions are fundamental to a functioning democracy. They assert that political parties should fully enjoy these rights and that registration requirements and procedures should be reasonable and tailored to legitimate aims in a democratic society. State control over political parties should be limited, allowing parties to have autonomy over their internal processes. The extensive monitoring of party functioning, including the requirement to provide member lists to the state, is seen as overly intrusive and incompatible with the principles of necessity and proportionality. Moreover, the election process is yet to be started in Azerbaijan, as municipal elections are scheduled for December 2024, when parliamentary and presidential elections will take place in 2025. Though it should be noted that in order to preserve the power, the government of Azerbaijan may conduct snap elections. On the edge of the election period, the more excessive repressions and human rights violations are expected to emerge. Members of the parliament have already predicted an upcoming constitutional referendum that may change the administrative governance and decide on transition to a bicameral parliament and proportional system of elections. Lawyers, political analysts, and human rights advocates expressed their concern on this matter, emphasizing that implemented changes may further enhance kleptocratic regime in Azerbaijan. In conclusion, the situation concerning freedom of association in Azerbaijan is deeply concerning. The repressive legislation, harassment of activists, surveillance practices, and restrictive laws on NGOs and political parties all contribute to an environment that undermines democratic values and human rights. We would like to emphasize on the following recommendation for this UPR process. Implement fully all the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights in a timely and effective manner without reservations or exceptions. 2. Respect all the country's commitments and obligations as a member of the United Nations, including its Human Rights Council, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the Council of Europe. 3. Review the restrictive law on NGOs and political parties and amend it in line with the international standards and recommendations of relevant international structures. And 4. Guarantee the full exercise of the rights to freedom of assembly, expression, and association, also by improving the environment for NGOs to freely carry on their activities. I thank you very much, and I will pass the word back to Diana, who will introduce the further speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavlova. It's indeed crucial to shed the light on barbarous restrictions imposed on civil society and the freedom of association in Azerbaijan. And I would like to give the floor to Ms. Bayramova, who will update us on the situation regarding political prisoners in Azerbaijan and mainly emphasize on the state of her father, Dr. Gubat Ibadoglu. Thank you.
My name is Jala Bayramova, and I'm here to talk about my father's condition and the situation in Azerbaijan regarding political prisoners. Beginning of this year, we only had 98 political prisoners, which is a huge number. But after my father's arrest on July 23rd, right now the number of political prisoners is more than 230. That is more than twice increase for the political prisoner, and this is the third crackdown on civil society in Azerbaijan. My father, who is a member of association on UN Convention Against Corruption, who is in the two working groups, which is about the great corruption and state capture and asset frozen. Right now he is in prison and is fighting for his life. He's been all the time advocating for substantial development goals and has been trying his best to advocate for human rights abroad, also in Azerbaijan. He was actually a professor at London School of Economics and has been investigating Aliyev and his family's assets abroad, mostly in UK. He was also investigating EU oil and gas deal and showing with his investigation that how Azerbaijan is actually buying the oil from Russia and especially gas from Russia and is selling to EU. His another investigation was about Aliyev and Erdogan's assets in Nagorno-Karabakh territories that have been took control by Azerbaijan since 2020. And those construction projects in Nagorno-Karabakh, they're all funded by World Bank, EBRD, and other EU institutions as well. There's so many corruption and embezzlements that my father has been researching. Now he's paying the price. Now he's a part of a revenge policy. My father, when he got arrested, he was deprived of medical care, doctor, medication, drinkable water, and also food. We couldn't get access to him, we couldn't talk to him, we couldn't do anything. And right now his situation is so terrible. His artery, the main vein in his heart, is expanding and it's been set by detention center. It's expanded from 3.9 to 4.1, and right now is it expanding further, and we have no idea how is the situation. The expansion of artery, it's not reversible. You can't do anything with that. You can only stop it, and the only way to stop it is to get a medical care. He's been developing dysfunction on his left heart. His diabetes is so high, it's 20 basically, is very close to diabetic coma. He came there only been taking the tablet, one tablet a day, 750 milligram. Now he's injecting insulin in his body, but his diabetes is not going down. He's injecting insulin with we gave him a 12 dose, now it's like 22 in 1 week. There's a European Court of Human Rights decision under Rule 39 that he needs to be hospitalized immediately. Nothing is happening. We have a motion in UK Parliament, the first motion about human rights situation in UK Parliament, nothing is happening. We have a European Parliament resolution, nothing is happening. Aside from that, as if this is not enough, they put a travel ban to all our relatives, even the ones that doesn't even have our surname, like my father's distant cousins. They ransacked my little brother's room in a shared apartment in New Jersey in USA. It's under FBI investigation. They spreaded my personal photos. Why? Because we are going around and we are advocating for him. We are advocating for other political prisoners because we are speaking up. They're targeting our family. They're targeting our relatives. They're targeting my father. My father, who is a well-known professor, scholar, investigator of the corruption and fighting for corruption. Right now he's in prison and his condition is quite horrible. Because of his arrest and because he's the well-known person that everybody thinks that if he cannot be released, then nobody in Azerbaijan can be released. Can you imagine the chilling effect, a snowball effect of this on civil society? We don't have any civil society anymore in Azerbaijan. We don't have anybody doing anything. People are so scared to do protests. They get kidnapped from their houses and their streets. There's like nothing is happening. But when we talk about it, we can't. Because Azerbaijan has an EU oil and gas deal. Azerbaijan, according to Freedom House Index, is worse than Belarus, Russia, and Iran. Its number is 9, score is 9, which is same as China. And it was only the beginning of this year. But there is no special rapporteur on Azerbaijan. UN Human Rights Commission made a tweet about our father, and we are very thankful for it. But we also asked them to at least help us to bring him a doctor. I'm not even advocating for his release. I'm advocating for him to get a medical care, so he doesn't die there. So he gets a doctor who gets a prescription. We have Amnesty International who is advocating for him, Human Rights Watch, various the US State Department has been saying that they're alarmed about his condition as well. All these places, EU offices trying to get access to him in prison, Swedish government is trying. There's a motion for him in Swedish Parliament. We are trying to reach everywhere that we can, including every institution, but nothing is happening. Nothing is happening because there is good dictators and there's a bad dictators. And Aliyev is a considered good dictator. But you know who's paying the price? We are paying the price. We are, who are citizens in Azerbaijan, are paying the price. We are even scared to go outside. For 3 years, our land and water borders are closed. We can only leave the country by state and the government-owned planes if they allow us to do so. Do you see how Azerbaijan is becoming, what kind of place it's becoming? This is the third crackdown we are fighting against. But all the bilateral agreements, all these trades and everything, all this business just goes on with Azerbaijan as it is. We are advocating for sanctions against Azerbaijan. There's not a single sanction against Azerbaijan. All this needs to be done, but aside from that, we need a special rapporteur for Azerbaijan after all these reviews to be decided. And I also ask you, and ask everybody, and also ask UN special rapporteurs, Human Rights Commission, please try to visit my father. Please try to see him. Please help us to get him at least a doctor and medical care. And that's such a minimum thing that we are trying to achieve and we can't right now. Thank you very much for listening to my speech.
Thank you, Ms. Bayramova. We're deeply grateful for your personal testimony. We stand with your family, and we are very much looking forward to prompt and unconditional release of Dr. Ibadoglu, and additional to all of the political prisoners who now serve in sentences behind the bars in Azerbaijan. Now I would like to pass the floor to Abid Gafarov, who will share his insights on the cases of torture and ill treatment committed by the government of Azerbaijan. Mr. Gafarov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to use the opportunity to thank the organizers of this event, which is very important towards the moving towards democracy in Azerbaijan. So, Abid Gafarov, journalist and human rights defender from Azerbaijan. I'm here to share the situation in Azerbaijan for last 4 years in terms of basic human rights. Starting from elections to Parliament of Azerbaijan, as I and Mehman Huseinov, who is the representative of our organization, we both were candidates, and we can confirm that the elections were totally falsified, and there is not even one parliamentarian elected by people. Even one of the parliamentarians, Erkin Gadirli, publicly confessed that there is no any parliamentarian in the parliament elected by people's will. So there is no change at all in terms of democratic elections in Azerbaijan, and this is the violation of recommendation made by Australia back in May 2018 during the recommendation sessions. I will quote, "Carry out free and fair elections consistent with the expectations of the international election monitoring community." Next, I would like to move to the subject which I was involved in investigation of. This is based on the recommendation from Greece. Thoroughly investigate all allegations of torture and ill treatment of detainees and hold perpetrators accountable. Back in 2017, hundreds of soldiers and officers were subject to tortures in Azerbaijan army. Based on our investigative calculations, about 1,767 people were subjected to physical, mental, and sexual tortures for a period of 2 months. Officially, 9 people were killed under the tortures, but our investigations clarified 11 people's murder under the tortures. Here is the list of them. Overtime serviceman Mehman Huseinov was detained on 1st of May and killed on 8th of May. Overtime serviceman Elkhan Agazadeh, detained on 1st of May and killed on 11th of May. Overtime serviceman Elchin Guliev, detained on 3rd of May and killed on 6th of May. Lieutenant Colonel Saleh Gafarov was detained on 4th of May and killed on 13th of May. Captain Süleyman Kazimov, detained on 4th of May and killed on 7th of May. Lieutenant Temkin Nizamioğlu, detained on 4th of May and killed on 13th of May. Senior Lieutenant Sabirli Adil was detained on 5th of May and killed on the same day. Lieutenant Elchin Mirzaliyev, detained on 7th May and killed on 25th of May. Warrant Officer Sakhavet Bunyatov, detained on 8th of May and killed on 16th of May. Soldier Dayandur Azizi was detained on 12th of May and killed on 20th of May. Warrant Officer Ruslan Ocakverdiev was detained on 16th of June and killed on the same day. In March of 2021, 2 main YouTube channels started public investigation of this mass torture event. Azov Freedom TV and Kim TV channels, and I was host of the Kim TV YouTube channel and bringing light into these enormous tortures. We managed to interview hundreds of victims who suffered from a different range of inhumane tortures. Here is the list of tortures methods applied. So might be disturbing. Beaten with wooden sticks, plastic and iron, steel pipes, wire ropes. All soldiers and officers stripped totally naked and always kept next to each other. Beating with blunt instruments resulting in damage of internal organs, brain damage and blindness. Keeping hungry and thirsty for many days. Removal of fingernails from hands and feet. Tearing the flesh with tweezers and pliers. Raising above the ground for 1.5 or 2 meters and then dropping from that height to the concrete floor. Insulting close relatives, forcing soldiers and officers to rape each other in front of the cameras, piercing various areas of the body with sharp tools, opening holes on various body parts with drill bits, etc. Drilling through the femur bone, melting the plastic materials and pouring it onto different parts of the body, hands, chest, back, etc. Tearing off the swollen wounds on the back, sprinkling salt and pepper to the wound and trampling it with boots. Threatening of raping their family members, especially children and spouses. Inflicting pain by inserting a tip of the tool under the nail, needle, nail, piece of wood, etc. Applying electricity to the affected areas. Suffocating by hanging by the legs, pushing heads into the containers full of water. So it is called waterboarding. Forcing to drink urine instead of water. Keeping them inside the feces and stench by not allowing them to meet their natural needs for days and weeks. Keeping them in rooms where the walls, floors, and ceilings splattered with human blood and human internal organs on the floor, fully contaminated surroundings. Causing death by dislocating their internal organs by inserting a scraper, iron tools, wooden slats, and bare legs into their anus. This has been done to many soldiers and officers. To make people feel suffocated by kicking them in the stomach by pouring water of up to 5 liters from bottles into their throat. Covering the mouth and nose with a damp of cloth, pouring water over it, making it impossible to breathe, and creating a feeling of suffocation. Few died in this process according to the witnesses. Breaking people's teeth with iron, steel objects, and pulling them out. According to one of officials, a 10-liter bucket of teeth was collected from the place of torture while there was a cleaning in progress after the tortures. Many soldiers and officers were raped in front of each other. According to one eyewitness, one of these rapes was done on the flag of the Republic of Azerbaijan and were filmed by their own personnel, giving electroshock from different parts of the body to all soldiers and officers. Oral cavity, extracted teeth, fingernails, genitals, forcing cable into anus hole, etc. They were constantly electrocuted. Torturing soldiers and officers by stripping them naked and forcing them to cling to each other in the form of a train by connecting the first and the last soldier to an electrical cable and letting electricity to pass through them at once. Beating people until they fall into a coma or fainting, giving them electricity to bring them back to their conscience again. Some victims say some were in a coma for up to 3 months after these tortures. Keeping their hands and feet tied to the bed for days in the hospital, where they were treated before their release. Forcing them on trucks in a state of nakedness and dismemberment during the transfer from one place of torture to another. Dragging of concrete stone and asphalt surface. Forcing them to sit on their knees and facing against the walls for days with their hands tied behind their back. Throwing them from the 2nd and 3rd floors of torture building onto the asphalt or paved areas. There are testimonies of the killing of at least 2 high-ranking officers by this method. Creating health problems, especially memory loss, and killing with poisoned needles by injecting unknown substances into the victims' bodies. Physical and psychological pressure on the spouses of many detained soldiers and officers, as well as their young children, after inserting the bulb into victims' mouths and applying high voltage from both at the same time, from mouth and anus hole, and making the lightning bulb to explode. On the way to the dining room, forcing a victim person to lie down on his face at the entrance door and force hundreds of others to stepping on him while walking blindfolded, forcing some to walk on a field full of poisonous snakes and getting bitten by snakes. At least one of them died at the scene of the snake attack, according to an eyewitness. This was not just a journalist investigation. we managed to document all these tortures and send it to main prosecution office, to Supreme Court, to Parliament, to presidential and vice presidential office. But there was not any reaction for 6 months. In November 2021, Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe started a movement for a resolution regarding the case and appointed a reporter. Only after this, on 17th of December in 2021, prosecution office started a new investigation on this case. Despite the fact of several high-ranked generals were involved in these tortures, like General Khanlar Valiyev, head of military prosecution office, Shafayat Imranov, deputy of military prosecution office, General Hikmet Hasanov, head of military union, General Mubariz Rizayev, head of military union, General Mais Barkhudarov, head of military union, General Najmuddin Sadiqov, head of main military headquarters, and General Zakir Hasanov, Minister of Defense. None of them were subjected to the prosecution yet. They are not just in freedom, they are still in power and acting generals. Government of Azerbaijan didn't arrest the generals who organized and delivered the tortures. Instead, they arrested the journalists investigating this case. This is another violation of recommendation from Czechia. I will quote, investigate allegation of arbitrary arrests of human rights defenders and journalists and ensure that freedom of opinion and expression is not unduly restricted on grounds of extremism, defamation, or humiliation of honor. Firstly, they arrested İlham Hasanoğlu, who was a leading figure in this investigation. He was arrested just 1 day before his son's wedding party, and he is still behind the bars. He was arrested on fabricated defamation charges. A month later, I was arrested for 1 year. Same on fabricated defamation charges. This is another violation of the recommendation from Belgium. Take steps to implement its international obligations on freedom of expression, including the decriminalization of defamation. I survived a clinical death in prison hospital in December of 2022. And just because I managed to socialize this incident, government punished me by sending back to the colony without proper medical treatment. I had an issue in the right side of my body, a neurological stroke. My family managed to bring a doctor to the colony to examine me and to issue a prescription for medicaments. I received medical treatment for my own money. This is another violation of the recommendation from Ireland, Chile, Austria, Australia, and South Korea and Brazil. Ensure prompt, effective, independent, and impartial investigations into all allegations of arbitrary detention, torture, and ill treatment of human rights defenders, civil society activists, and journalists. After İlham Hasanoğlu and me, the government arrested Avaz Zeynallı, owner of Hural TV, who was supporting this investigation and publishing the interviews. He also still in the prison and suffering from eyes getting blind. No any medical treatment provided for arrested human rights defenders and journalists. But we all were luckier than Oktay Guliyev. He was one of the first people looking into army tortures. He got hit by a car while crossing the street and was in a coma for 2 years. Here I would like to move to situation of freedom of speech and expression in Azerbaijan, as there is another violation against the recommendation from Norway. Let the internet remain an area for free speech, particularly by unblocking the opposition websites closed in the spring of 2017 and stopping the persecution of people voicing critical opinions online. I think I can make it short just by sharing the list of arrested journalists and bloggers with you. So my list contains 14, but this is not the full list, unfortunately. İlham Aslanoğlu, journalist from Caspian Information Center. Avaz Zeynallı, journalist and owner of Khural Media. Polat Aslanov, journalist, owner of Haberman and Press.az. Mahir Elekberov, journalist, Azad Info.az. Osman Nermanoğlu Rzayev, journalist, Democratic.az. Nazaket Mammadova, owner and host of Alpha TV. Afgan Khanaliyev, blogger in TikTok. Jamil Mehmedli, journalist, freelancer. Aslan Gurbanov, blogger. Rashad Ramazanov, blogger. Bakhtiyar Hacıyev, blogger and activist. Elvin Isayev, blogger and activist, arrested and deported from the Ukraine. Maksud Ibrahimov, blogger, deported from Germany and arrested in the Ukraine. Samir Ashurov, blogger and activist, deported from Germany and was arrested on his arrival to Baku. The government made a new media law, and now all journalists and media groups must be listed in the new media register. Recently, a media organization went to the court to ask for the closure of media groups not registered, and this happened just 3 days ago. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation in Azerbaijan calls for urgent international attention and action. We must collectively condemn the suppression of freedom of speech and urge the Azerbaijani government to respect the rights of its own citizens, including journalists and activists. We must stand together in support of those who seek to bring about positive change in their country. If anyone has any question, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Gafarov. It is indeed chilling to hear testimony like yours, but
I think I have a question. Because, why this torture has happened? What's it?
Okay. Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. So all this big-scale torture in the army happened because our Minister of Defense and military prosecution office wanted to make like a witch hunt. So hunting for the betrayers for the Armenian side. But because there is, they were looking for the Armenian spy within the army, but because there wasn't any solid proof, they decided to apply the tortures and receive the confession from the soldiers and officers. So soldiers and officers were subjected to the tortures has 3 choices. Choice number 1, to confess by saying that, yes, I'm a spy, I'm working for Armenia. Choice number 2, I'm not a spy, but he is spy. Point on someone else. And third choice, just to die under these inhumane tortures. And as a result, 360 people received a medical statement because they were raped by glass bottles, by plastic pipes, by metal rods. And medical assessment was done on their anus hole and provided prescription saying that they were raped by Armenians. And more than 30 of them were arrested on the charge of betrayal to the motherland. But in December 2022, we managed to get 19 of them released from the prison. But remaining are still in the prison. And main important thing, the generals, high-ranked generals who organized and delivered these tortures, who composed these tortures, are still in freedom and in charge. So we are looking forward on urgent justice regarding these enormous tortures. This is, for now, this is shame for a structure which is called a state. Thank you. If any more questions, you are welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Gafarov. It is indeed chilling to hear a testimony like yours, but at the same time, it's essential to shed the light on the atrocities that were committed by Azerbaijani authorities and the impunity of the latter. On behalf of our partners organization, Human Rights Club, who unfortunately was not able to be present today on the panel, I would like to give a short overview of the UPR submission for the fourth circle of Azerbaijan. Firstly, it should be noted that the violation of human rights and basic freedoms have been perpetrated by the ruling regime to cover the widespread corruption in the country. Azerbaijan is a source-rich country which takes transparency in the existing industry and public scrutiny very important. However, the situation with corruption only worsened in the last few years. As it is, Azerbaijan withdrew from the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative to avoid any scrutiny and the organization might have offered. The level of patronage and cronyism in Azerbaijan is also on the rise, the most evident example being the appointment by President Aliyev of his wife to the position of the first vice president of the country. It is precisely to hide this appalling situation that the ruling regime is continuously suppressing fundamental human rights and freedoms, most importantly the freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly, which play a vital role in any effective fight against corruption. Also, the local legislation guaranteed the freedom to start and join independent trade unions and grant employees the freedom to collectively bargain. Unions were unable to effectively negotiate wage levels and working conditions since powerful state-owned corporations were run by government-appointed boards who also determined salaries for government personnel. Trade unions themselves are totally under the control of ruling regime. In summer 2023, the government of Azerbaijan launched another wave of crackdown against the trade union activists. The member of the Azerbaijan Trade Union Confederation under the Democracy 1918 movement, Elvin Mustafayev and Ayhan Israilov, were charged under the large scale of drug trafficking of the Criminal Court of Azerbaijan and arrested for 4 months in August 2023. The chairman of the Alternative Confederation of Trade Union, Afedin Mamedov, was detained by police on the afternoon of September 20 near his home. Afedin was detained when he left the building where he lives. One person approached him, he injured himself with a knife and threw the knife at Afedin, and the police immediately appeared and detained him, reported by the trade union members. The organization believes that Mamedov's detention is related to his trade union activities and a provocation was committed against him. Mamedov has been charged under the hooliganism committed with the use of weapon or an object used as a weapon and intentional infliction of serious harm to the health. He may serve up to 8 years in prison. Mamedov denied all the charges and linked them to his public and trade union activities. Another issue to be addressed is the administration of justice. Azerbaijani authorities continue to exercise undue influence over the members of the legal profession. All lawyers are required to be members of the Bar Association to be able to practice. Thus, any lawyer critical of the authorities may simply be disbarred and thus banned from their profession. The most notable recent example is that of Shahla Humbatova, a well-known Azerbaijani human rights defender and lawyer. She worked as a defense lawyer in Azerbaijan since 2013 and is one of a handful of legal advocates who have been consistently willing to defend individuals facing punishment for exercising their fundamental freedoms. She has defended human rights defenders, journalists, bloggers, youth activists, members of the political opposition, and others. In January 2019, she spoke publicly about the poor conditions of political prisoner and journalist Mehman Husseinov. She was later cautioned for spreading false information. After this, the prison refused her to allow her access to Husseinov. The Bar Association attracted international criticism for moving to disbar Humbatova. There were international protests, and in 2020 she was recognized as an International Woman of Courage by the U.S. Secretary of State. Under the public pressure, the government was forced to renew her ability to practice. The Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights also noted that the recent reform of November 2017, which excluded lawyers from the civil and administrative proceedings before courts, unless they were members of Azerbaijani Bar Association, left many people without access to legal assistance and representation. She also expressed concern about the quality of the legal assistance provided, which could be of formalistic nature, by the fact that the access to a lawyer could be delayed. It is, in our view, that the foremost recommendations is for the Azerbaijani government to examine thoroughly the findings and recommendations of the previous report, which were not complied with. It is imperative that Azerbaijan fully comprehends the reality that no effective actions have been taken to remedy the faults in regard to previous report. As follows, we would like to present the following recommendations. First, strengthen the fight against corruption using available international mechanisms and assistance of relevant international structures to eliminate any possibility of bias or conflict of interest. 2. Promote transparency in the extraction industry, including rejoining the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative by implementing all of the organization's guidelines and previous recommendations. Provide for an efficient system of asset disclosure for all public officials from all the branches of government, including but not limited to the President, First Vice President, Prime Minister, members of government, officials of the central and local executive officers, members of parliament, judges, prosecutors, as well as the members of their families and close relatives. 4. Provide for the functioning of independent trade unions while removing the unlawful control of the existing trade unions and other national associations by the government. And 5. Review the legislation and rules regulating the activity of lawyers, bringing it in line with the international standards, securing the independence and objectivity of members of the legal profession and the ability of citizens to receive the adequate legal counsel of their own choice. I thank you, and with this being said, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Emin Husseinov, the CEO of Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety, for his testimony and some closing remarks. Mr. Husseinov, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear colleagues. And I would like to, first of all, say I'm absolutely support all your statements and approve them. And in additional to Jala's and Abid's statements, I would like to attend for its torture happened not with servicemen. And his story which has happened with this hundreds of servicemen in Azerbaijan and civilians which is near in the front line, which is namely famous like Tartar case, and the name of the district when it's happened. It's only part of the iceberg. During the 2 decades, we report about another type of the torture against political activists, was kidnapped. The same things happen with other famous civic and civil rights activists. We don't able to mention everything, but if you, what I would like to say, it's actually we always during our recommendation in the UPR process, we named the issues with the torture is very important for us. But what we saw, even member states give it recommendations for us and for, namely for Azerbaijani government, who is responsible for implementing their commitments and obligations in respect of UN Convention of Human Rights and European Convention for Human Rights. The situation going worse and worse, and is also probably affected with the situation with the state of democracy in Azerbaijan, when one ruling family staying on the ruling for more than 30 years. Like imagine, and power transferred from father to son, from him after to his wife, like when it's in Azerbaijan, president appointed his wife as like vice president. It's like only 2 UN member states have such kind of very bad practice. It's like authoritarian regime in Azerbaijan and in Nicaragua when President appointed his wife as vice president, and with lack of opportunities for democratic transitions, all of these violations with my colleagues mentioned here, it is logical continued of this situation. And unfortunately, what we find, mechanisms like UPR and recommendations which is provided by member states sometimes didn't change anything, and that is questions for member states how to improve on behalf of their side this mechanism, because our sources as like civil society, we are losing our human capacity in Azerbaijan, because our colleagues which is prepared this UPR reports, most of them now in jail. Most of them start to implementing self-censorship because they are literally afraid submit on behalf of their names or behalf of their organizations this UPR submissions. And it's also lack of capacity affiliated with the lack of funding, because government since from 2014 destroyed civil space. Like now Azerbaijan have the worst shrinking space compared with all Council of Europe member states. And it's impossible to getting funds for implementing projects on human rights. This situation continued since from 2013 when President Aliyev decided to stay for third presidential terms. And before he illegally changed constitution with huge electoral falsification and violations. And everything what's happened in Azerbaijan, all this human rights violation, as you already probably understood, is affected with lack of accountability, lack of transparency, and it's our colleagues, which is previously submitted together with us, strong UPR recommendations as like one of the champion of Azerbaijani civil society, Gubadi Badoğlu. Today he's inside the prison, and even he's not able to help to himself. And we are completely disappointed how it's possible to continue to operate in such kind of extremely difficult situation. Next week, Azerbaijani government's representatives supposed to attend to the sessions, and we would like to call to member states be stronger and be more principled, because today what we saw, especially after Russian violations against Russian aggressions to the Ukraine, like-minded states start to be less outspoken on issues what's happened in oil-rich and gas-rich Azerbaijan. And we would like to remind you for the same situation of a Russian civil society when Western community like-minded states tried to engage with Putin because he provided cheap oil and gas, and sometimes they completely close the eyes what's happened in Russia. In Russia, for example, when Abid mentions the appointment procedure for Special Rapporteur of the Council of Europe on parliamentary elections, imagine this rapporteur was appointed because Tartar case happened in Azerbaijan. He's examined only two countries, Russia and Azerbaijan, because as you remember, Gulagunet, Russian famous anti-torture NGO, publicly distribute mass torture, what's happened in Russian prisons. And now it's also a Russian review going on during this week. And the authoritarian member states, they exchange their practice, they exchange this torture type, they exchange their practice how to block civil society's participation in the public life. But we need strong support from like-minded states to strongly staying shoulder to shoulder with Azerbaijani civil society and human rights community and help us to defend fundamental rights in Azerbaijan. On the previous recommendations to Azerbaijan, which is quite strong recommendation provided from Czechia, Canada, Austria, and Cyprus, to ensure that civil society organizations and activists can operate without or Austria when they call to proper and independent investigations to investigate all harassment and violence against journalists, human rights defenders, and outspoken voices, or Canada, which called to investigate as well all arbitrary arrest of the civil society representatives, or Czechia, which is called Azerbaijan, investigate allegation to arbitrary arrest of human rights defenders and especially journalists. What we observe, extremely huge level, even after this recommendation, extremely huge level of impunity continued. And again, we don't have any choice and to remind periodically, and it's even if we believe for its mechanism as like UPR, still not like famous as like UN other mechanisms. We try to use all opportunities and mention attention around dramatic situation with the human rights in Azerbaijan, and we would like to engage with and support with Azerbaijani civil society stakeholders, help them to make stronger capacity potential for future upcoming UPR enforced. And in the end, I would like to say, imagine all of these UPR submissions which we provided. If before, when Azerbaijani government decided to destroy us, we engage with the UN member states, they are supported via us via small grants, and provide their institutional contribution to provide stronger fact-based like UPR info. For the last 8 years, situations looks like we try to survive, and we prepare most of these submissions like pro bono. And we see lack of the interest of the member states to support, financially support, independent Azerbaijani civil society on produce report. But what we saw, like Azerbaijani government start to use another initiative. They start to support via state NGO support fund, which is controlled by presidential administration, loyal NGOs like inside Azerbaijan, which is named like independent NGO, but they are gongos, like which is namely like distributed pro-governmental positions. They try to minimize our dramatic pictures. They say, for look, most of these human rights offenders, which is living in exile, they try to demonize ruling regime in Azerbaijan. And sometimes it's difficult even for us to check. They are prepared tons of reports with the false information without like a changing focus what's happening in Azerbaijan to completely other things. And it's kind of new era of like state propaganda in preparations of report. The same things happen not only with UPR mechanisms, the same things happen even with other UN treaty bodies, or during the evaluations process with the Human Rights Committee, Committee Against Torture, or other institutions. That what it extremely shows for importance of the civil societies, which is some of the representatives still able to operate it in a very difficult condition inside Azerbaijan. And some of our brave colleagues join us like in August on UPR pre-sessions. Maybe most of you also able to attend to these sessions, but we would like to ask to help us distribute our awareness around our mentioned topics, and even together, as we saw in many countries, in many parts of the world, we observe mass violations with the human rights, and we understand for not only Azerbaijan, which has have this dramatic situation, we ask like member states who is able to provide like strong and principled recommendation, help us distribute our fact-based submissions, and everything what we mentioned here, we have a publicly recorded video. We can publish our side event via YouTube, and please, and we will send to all member states as well, publicly available, all our recorded conference. Feel free to distribute between your colleagues. We understand why it's difficult to cover everything with a limited human resources, but on this, in the end of this, I would like to ask, give me 2 more minutes regarding the most very important topics related with the, I'm at the issues related with the torture, for its torture happened also with the civil people, but in other issues with political prisoners, like biggest numbers of political prisoners, which is, as Jala mentioned, it's more than 230. First of all, some of these political prisoners are arrested on the second round. It's like revolving door principle. Under international pressure, some of famous human rights defenders released, and they are arrested them again. And government of Azerbaijan, most of us operated in exile, like Jala's father, Gubade Badoğlu, who stay in exile for many years with us. And imagine government, which is some of their representative, and probably next week, same deputy general prosecutor, which is sent to all of us letter with confess for. We know about all of your concerns regarding human rights issues and shrinking space for civil society. We are addressed to, on behalf of the Azerbaijan General Prosecutor Office, everyone feel free to come back to Azerbaijan. We promise to not persecute you anymore. You can come and criticize us as you want. And unfortunately, Gubade Badoğlu believed to these promises, and he returned back to Azerbaijan and arrested 2 or 3 weeks after. That is what is maybe the case with Gubade's last case, but in the end of this numbers of this huge numbers of political prisoners, 230 persons is only numbers of the people which is we able to calculate and document it with our colleagues, because the probably numbers of the political prisoners much higher, like let's say in Belarus, like when our colleagues documented for its, like from Vyasna, for Human Rights Center Vyasna, for its, more than 1,500 political prisoners. On the same time, they say for probably these numbers of the imprisoned people much higher. And in Azerbaijan, they start to put to the prison as well many hundreds and hundreds peaceful religious activists, like a prisoner of, namely like prisoner of the conscience. They find, like arrest people with a beard, they say, look, you are Islamic fundamentalists, like, and they try to play with these topics as well with the Western European partners, because Azerbaijan Council of Europe member state, Azerbaijan part of the Eastern Partnership Program, Azerbaijan member of OSCE, and they say they have fabricated hundreds and hundreds fake charges and say, we are arrested in border with around 100 people, which is probably or might be have a pro-Iranian position. They are tortured him. They are arrested with them not with some kind of extremism charges. Just puts literally a few grams of drugs to their pocket and arrested for 5 or 6 years. And with this kind of stuff, they do extremely dangerous environment when people even afraid to criticize the government via social media, via Facebook or Twitter or any other social media. In this, I would like to finish, and thanks again for everyone.
If you don't mind, can I add some?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. So this is really a very worrying situation regarding the massive and total arrest of citizens in Azerbaijan, and actually this creates some atmosphere of terror and horror in the country, and the conductor of this terror and horror is state, is government. Yes, our government uses all the properties, all the potentials of the state only to punish smash and destroy and kill the citizens of Azerbaijan. And I will give you just one example. Just imagine the priest of the church is arrested by drugs, and in the police station, he's blackmailed to be raped if he doesn't sign the confession. Just imagine. So this and similar the stories happening in Azerbaijan on daily basis. And we are lucky, just the people who are getting to the prison and getting outside, because some people cannot survive the hard, the tough situation in the prison. And Oktay Gulaliyev, whose name I've already mentioned, was very active, proactive human rights defender and got hit by a car when he was crossing a road. And artificially, he was put into the coma for 2 years. Now, he's awake, but it is very unfortunate and pity to say that he's like a piece of meat. So can't talk, can't react.
It's completely paralyzed.
Yeah, paralyzed completely, yeah. So sometimes the people like myself or Mehman Hüseyinov or other journalists and the human rights defenders, when we get alive out from the prison, we are lucky. Some people cannot make it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gafarov. Thank you, Mr. Hüseyinov. Now, as we don't have much time remained, I would like to open the floor for any questions and comments from the audience. And yes, Belgium, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for organizing this event, and thank you for all the information you shared today. I just had a very concrete question for Ms. Bayramova. Is Gubat currently charged with anything? Is he convicted? Is there any trial date? A bit more context on that. And then also, your colleague touched upon it briefly, but can you tell a bit more about the circumstances leading up to his arrest? Is there something concretely that took place, a statement he published or whatever, or just his return to the country a few weeks before? Anything you could share about that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So he's charged right now. There's 2 accusations against him. When he was detained as a witness, so he wouldn't have a lawyer. But later on, they brought 2 charges. So the first charges was the counterfeit money. According to them, they found $40,000 in the office that he used 8 years ago. So he's not using the office, doesn't belong to him. And even though Dr. Gubat just entered the country and they checked his all luggages and everything, where this $40,000 came from is unknown. And the second charges is because he was a full-time lecturer at Rutgers University, State University, there's a lot of senators are advocating for him, and he became a political prisoner at Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission at the House of Representatives in the USA. So because after that, they brought the charges of religious extremism. They state that they founded religious books in the office that we are talking about, but those books and their names are not in the search and confiscation protocol. So how they funded, how did they appear there is quite unknown. And we assume that they did this religious extremism charges is because the West are quite hesitant with Islam. So I think that's to discourage. And they have been using this kind of discouraging methods with other political prisoners for the international support quite of a long time. I think that his arrest can be linked to the foundation that he opened in UK. So he opened a foundation in UK that there has been a lot of confiscation of Azerbaijani elites' money in UK. And what's going to happen to that money is quite unknown. It cannot be returned back to the state, but also it cannot be stayed in the UK government because it belongs to the Azerbaijani people and citizens. He stated that he wants to work with that money and make it as a scholarship for Azerbaijani students, and also he has been investigating a lot of other assets and offshore companies, and he was stated that he's going to go after all this as well. I think that after that they arrested him, and I think that was the main thing for them to get arrested him. There's two matters of investigating elites' assets, but also the matter of scholarship. Scholarship for Azerbaijani students are quite limited. We only have state scholarship that is only for the ones that are loyal to regime. And considering the Azerbaijani diaspora completely controlled by Azerbaijani government, it is important to state that Azerbaijan really cares who gets out of the country and who comes to this kind of events and talks to people. And I don't want the scholarship, this kind of scholarship, to be given to the students who can be opposition and independent minded. So that will be the main second reason. But he was also writing research about the embezzlement and corruption in Nagorno-Karabakh, about Aliyev's family businesses, which we also published it after his arrest, because it was supposed to be ready a week after his arrest, but his arrest delayed it, so we were able to publish in August. So that can also another option. But primarily we believe that it's because of the Aliyev assets. And out of $40,000, half of them is, according to them, is fake money, and half of them is real. We don't have the serial numbers, they're not given to us, so we can maybe ask US government to check it. And we are quite limited with the information details of that, even though we are requesting it. We cannot see the protocols of the court, we cannot see the expert opinion about this money and about the alleged books that they have found. So we, even though gave the fingerprint expert, like asked them to do fingerprint check on the books and as well as on the money, and they have refused to do that as well.
I forget to add one important thing, because the numbers you see, Abid mentioned one case with mass torture, more than 1,500 servicemen and approximately 200 civilians which live around this military base. But I just forget to mention the case with the Pegasus spyware, which is Azerbaijani government ordered from Israeli NSO group, and using for illegal surveillance against 1,000 representatives of the Azerbaijani civil society. And maybe Jala mentioned some issues which is related with this. For example, her private phone hacked and they steal her personal correspondence or like photo or video materials, try to blame other female activists, which is usually started to implement by Azerbaijani government since from 2012. But if in 2012 they are installed like hidden video recorders in the bedrooms of the famous female activists or politician activists, and start to make blame and chantage them for stop their public activity or stop their investigative journalism activity. Right now they start to use artificial intelligence tools, and they start to use illegal tools, which is illegally start to use nanotechnological tools, which is produced of the leading ICT companies in the world, and supposed to be prevent huge crimes as like a terrorist attacks or something. They are using this not against terrorists in Azerbaijan. They are using against like human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society actors and their relatives. And imagine that compare with India, which is have a 1.5 billion population. Indian government using this approximately 100 activists for such kind of big country. But Azerbaijan, for 10 million population, using 1,000 ordered like a special accounts to organize mass surveillance against civil society. And that is maybe also one of the key focus supposed to be for member states to remind to Azerbaijan properly investigate this case, because the Azerbaijani government, even from this 1,000 people, like 45 journalists, brave journalists, which is they're not afraid to go against government, they decide to use domestic remedies. They apply to General Prosecutor Office, for National Intelligence Office, to ask an order investigation. This is law enforcement agencies denied to investigate these mass violations. And we have like to heard for member states also try to push to Azerbaijan and remind them to prevent such kind of illegal practice, and that's it.
Thank you. As I see no additional questions, I would like to thank our panelists for their insightful testimonies and our audience for your interest and your time. We believe that today's statements will contribute to your recommendations to Azerbaijan, and we consider it's crucial to establish a robust cooperation with the member states to combat the authoritative governance in the Republic of Azerbaijan and ensure positive change, as well as make the UPR process more efficient. We remain completely available for any further private communication to comment more on the issues concerned. We thank you once again and wish you a great day.